There's never a dull moment in the life of a turn-based RPG fan, certainly not in our year 2025. We've had some extraordinary games, both remasters like Final Fantasy Tactics, The Evil East Chronicles and the Trails in the Sky First Chapter remake, and brand new stories to whisk us off our feet like Clair Obscur Expedition 33 and Digimon Story Time Stranger. But we're getting another major drop at the end of October, one I'm extremely excited for, with Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD Remake. Now I know for a fact that you guys know how much I love the Dragon Quest franchise. I actually completed my collection of the DS Dragon Quest numbered games fairly recently, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I finally found my copy of Dragon Quest 4. And you guys also know how much I love the HD-2D games in Square Enix's repertoire based on videos I've made in the past. By the way, I want to talk about Elliot the Adventurer so bad right now, having seen the demo for that, but we'll save that for another video. We are getting spoiled with Dragon Quest content right now, so let's take a look at why you guys should be as excited for Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD-2D Remake as much as I am. Dragon Quest 3 HD-2D Remake was wonderful. I reviewed it, I platinum trophied it, I loved it, but I'll be real with you, I wasn't sure what to expect from the DQ1 and 2 remakes because to call the original simplistic by today's standards would be quite the understatement, and explaining to people that Dragon Quest 3 actually comes before Dragon Quest 1 and 2 in terms of story, of which there is very little thanks to being NES titles, so remaking them would be quite the undertaking. Well, based on previews of the game through press outlets and content creators, some of which are good friends of mine like Genesis7, whose coverage you should absolutely check out on YouTube, and I absolutely trust their judgment here, it's looking like we have absolutely nothing to worry about as Square Enix have made drastic changes to the entire formula to make them feel like entirely new games in the Dragon Quest series, which is great considering it's been a long time since we've heard anything about Dragon Quest 12. As a side note though, as much as we'd all love to hear more about DQ12, I can completely understand why we haven't heard anything about it in a long time. After all, I'm not sure that anyone anticipated that both Akira Toriyama, famously the lead artist for the series, and Koichi Sugiyama, the composer for the game, who was a pretty controversial figure in his time to be fair, especially to guys like me, if you know you know, would pass away sadly during its development. I'd much rather that the team take their time with Dragon Quest 12 so as to respect its legacy, than rush it and risk tarnishing it. But going back to DQ1 and 2, if there were ever an homage to the Dragon Quest legacy, it's gonna be this game. Now I've always appreciated with Square Enix that they've largely kept the gameplay and the vibe, certainly, consistent throughout the Dragon Quest games, as opposed to Final Fantasy where they've been a lot more experimental, like genre bending, etc, which isn't a bad thing of course, but Dragon Quest always feels like a warm hug from a comfortable blanket, which I very much appreciate it for. According to producer Masaki Hayasaka, speaking to Games Radar, the story amongst the two games has been fleshed out by a pretty significant magnitude in terms of word count alone. He says that the original versions of the game had tens of thousands of words, whereas these remakes have millions. The original Dragon Quest should serve as a very interesting change from Dragon Quest 3, which served as the foundation for a lot of party-based JRPGs from its mechanics alone, as you actually only play as one character, the hero, which is Erdrick's descendant from Dragon Quest 3, and Dragon Quest 11 for what it's worth, from start to finish. The story of Dragon Quest 1 is as simple as they come, the hero simply journeys to save the Princess Gwaelin from the Dragon Lord, and that's pretty much it. But playing Dragon Quest 3 and seeing how much story was added to that should make it really interesting to see how much of the story actually gets added to the very first game in the series, as well as how much more closely it gets tied to Dragon Quest 3 in the process. We already know about some additions to the story content in Dragon Quest 1 and 2, as we know that Rubis, the goddess that created the world of Alefgard, is getting brand new content dedicated to her somewhere in this remake, and will add brand new characters and story events that we've never seen before. Yuji Naka, the creator of the Dragon Quest franchise, has specifically said that some of the additional story content is at least in part designed to tie the trilogy all together more neatly than it has ever been done before, so that'll be pretty exciting to see. It has been a very, very long time since I last played the original Dragon Quest. We're talking 15 years plus. But from what I can remember, it can't have taken any longer than like 8, maybe 9 hours or so to beat, and while Dragon Quest 2 is longer, certainly, I have a feeling that we're looking at a much wider experience with the HD-2D versions, let alone the fact that we're getting them both combined. Actually, this does make me wonder, how long do you think it would take to finish every Dragon Quest game in a count-up of sorts, similar to what I did for Final Fantasy a couple of years ago? Is that something you'd want to see? Let me know in the comments. It's kind of strange because Dragon Quest 1 and 2 are almost being treated as a single game with this remake, as you're expected to play them both for obvious reasons. Previews have also said that the combat in Dragon Quest II is surprisingly challenging, to balance out having a full party available with the Scions of Erdrick as opposed to the single hero you would have had in Dragon Quest I. Previews have talked about the tower they were asked to climb, presumably the Tower of Winds you see fairly early on in the game, and said that they were told by the Square Enix representatives there that the preview was designed to be difficult. So whether that converts over to the full release or just happened to be the setup given to the players at the time remains to be seen. The quality of life changes that we saw in Dragon Quest III that we've come to expect from modern releases, like an easy mode, auto battling, speed adjustments, all of that good stuff all seem to return in Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D, as well as a brand new accessibility option that highlights different moves and spells that you can use that are strong against the enemies you're fighting. That's all been added, so for people who don't want to have to remember or want a bit of time to take it all in, they can do that if they want to. This isn't an option that I would personally use because I like my games to be challenging, and I think that the task of working out what you have to use when and keeping that in your memory keeps me mentally engaged, and I get my joy from games that way. But it is a hallmark of modern gaming that many players would enjoy, so I'm sure it's appreciated. On the other side of the coin, I'm sure Draconian Quest will also make a return, so if you want Dragon Quest to be more difficult, the option is almost certainly going to be there for that too. Something else that I did want to touch on, which comes back to the previews I'd read by Games Radar and some other outlets, is that both Hayasaka and Yuji Horii have teased a really big surprise for Dragon Quest I and II, saying that fans of the franchise will find new twists for those who play the remake in chronological order. So if you play Dragon Quest III first, then Dragon Quest I, and then finally DQ2. So if you're wanting something to do while you're waiting for DQ1 and 2 to come out at the end of November, best get cracking again on 3 and refresh that memory, I reckon. Let's not forget that I could go on and on about how much I adore the HD-2D style of game, and I do on a semi-regular basis in fact, and I think it suits Dragon Quest perfectly. But what I don't talk about as much is the sound design in the Dragon Quest games, which has always been a massive highlight for me. I get the swell inside my tummy every time I hear the main theme of Dragon Quest, the level up noise, the end of battle noise. Yeah, a lot of that is rooted in nostalgia, but as I said earlier, having that consistency across the entire franchise is something I genuinely really appreciate. I applaud this franchise's ability to stick to its guns in its core games. We've had plenty of spin-offs, some of which are really good, some of which are not. I'm looking at you, Infinity Strash. But the core always stays the same, so it's easy to recommend this game, or any other Dragon Quest game for that matter, to someone who's enjoyed at least one. The lead developers on the Dragon Quest HD-2D trilogy have also made allusions to the fact that they would like to do more remakes in this style if the DQ Erdrick trilogy does well, and I can definitely see that happening, especially given how much Japan loves the Dragon Quest franchise overall. But I don't know about you, I'd be all over it if they did. If they could do me a favour and at least remake Dragon Quest V, or maybe the entire Zenithian trilogy if they fancy it, I'd be totally fine with that. I also wouldn't be opposed to yet another remake of the original Dragon Quest monsters either, because I love that game that much, but that's just the fanboy in me talking. It weren't that long ago that we got a remake with Terry's Wonderland, even though that never came outside of Japan. We're already spoiled enough with how much Dragon Quest we have coming, and I haven't even talked about Dragon Quest VII Reimagined today. Suffice to say, I'm obviously very excited about Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D Remake, and I hope that you guys are too. There's so much new content and so much reverence for one of the most iconic franchises in gaming history here that I can't help but be excited. But luckily, we don't have too much longer left to wait, as it's just a few weeks away, and I'll be doing more coverage on it as we get closer to the launch and beyond. So drop a like on this video if you love Dragon Quest as much as I do, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of it from me. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Take care.